Good evening. So I just pulled up this Go Live on my laptop so that I'll be able to see comments in real time, especially given sometimes when my phone, it just doesn't cooperate. So I don't have anything major to report from my day today. Had a really good lunch with my husband this afternoon. Spent some time with my kids this evening. Had Domino's for supper. That was pretty good. I think really that's the gist of it. I think one of the coolest things as far as like the non-eventful stuff, it's like the little things in life that turn out to be the big things, is yesterday I had like the best nap with my cats and my doggies on the couch. Like, I love falling asleep with a good book, and then just having all my little critters, my doggies and my cats around me. It's just, I don't know. It's awesome. So that was definitely a plus, I think. So feel free to let me know how your day has been in the comments. So we're just going to dive right in tonight with the Frankenstein spread, and that will be from Sasha Graham's 365 Tarot Spreads. And I know we've got some new people to our group. I would say if you're looking for inspiration, different ideas for spreads, this is such an awesome book. It's one for every day of the year. You can use it the way that Sasha had organized it per the date. That's the spread you do. Or because there's no hard rules with tarot, okay, you can just flip through the book to find the spread that resonates with you most and do it. So yeah, and I love like all the horror type characters. We've done a few. Frankenstein definitely holds a place in my heart because I've read it, I believe, a couple times in my life, and I don't really generally reread books unless I find them to be rather inspiring or have a good story, and then I gravitate to them more. But Mary Shelley, just the way that she created the monster that we know of as Frankenstein, the book is so beautifully written. It is a classic about this constructed man made from the remaining dead extremities and so forth of various corpses. This physician put Frankenstein together. And when he was born, of course, he looked ghastly and patched together, rather cumbersome. In the book, it goes into his humanity and how he longed to be part of the world that just would not accept him. So he very much in the story was like an outsider looking in. So it would pull on my heartstrings when I would read about Frankenstein. His character's the type where you would want to give Frankenstein a hug, and ultimately, if any of you guys have watched Penny Dreadful when it was on, because it was like one of my favorite shows I used to watch religiously. I probably need to rewatch it because it's very gothic and dark, and it touches upon classic literature, including Frankenstein. In that show, Frankenstein was very upset as creator, and Frankenstein in the show was referenced as the creature. And so when he finally faced his master as to why did you give me this life and abandon me, because ultimately in the show his master abandoned him. They had this argument, and his master's like, or he demanded of his master, I'm tired of being alone. You need to make me a companion. And so that's when we ended up having like the female complement to Frankenstein. And so that's when you think of the Bride of Frankenstein, which with me, when I think of the Bride of Frankenstein, I think of years ago, I went to a Lady Gaga concert dressed as the Bride of Frankenstein. I think Lady Gaga has calmed down a whole lot than what she used to be into back in the day with meat dresses and all sorts of various things she would do. But people who would go to her shows, I don't know if they still do this, but they would dress up. inspired by her music videos or what have you. But I had this big beehive of a wig, and I had this dress that looked like a little bit like it was like in tatters. It was a lucky wig. Like my friend at that time who went with me, we called my wig the lucky wig because we went from being in like the nosebleed section. Then we got upgraded to right, like not right by the stage, but where people are standing out from the stage. She and I were like right by it to where we could see Lady Gaga. And that was back when she would be like part of a motorcycle and she was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And it was such a good show, you know. So I very fondly have some great memories between Mary Shelley and Lady Gaga of Frankenstein, and even the Bride of Frankenstein. So, and I believe I do have somebody on here with me. I'm not sure who that is, so it may be my hubby. I think I might see his face up in the corner. So, hey Tim. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit from Sasha Graham first. So it would be as of August 30th. It says, on this day, author Mary Shelley was born on this day in 1797 in London, England. Shelley wrote the dark and gloomy archetypal Gothic novel Frankenstein, which she began writing when she was 18. Summation of the spread. Frankenstein is the classic tale of a man-made monster seeking acceptance, a cautionary tale of what goes tragically wrong when man makes Promethean-like attempts to control the nature of life and death. The Frankenstein spread uses the themes and symbols from the tale to shed light on your own life. And oh, hi, it is definitely my hubby. Hi, honey. And so, what I really like about what Sasha does with her spreads is she'll tend to do various shapes with her spreads based on the overall theme. And so with this, we've got a total of 11 cards. It's a doozy of a spread. And she has hers like 2 different lightning bolts. I don't know if you can necessarily see that very well. But again, like you guys know who've been with me any amount of time, just due to my limited space, I'm just going to go across with my cards, But again, do what resounds with you and, of course, what space allows. So she goes on, because I love this book. It's so full of facts, Frankenstein was conceived amidst a wet, rainy summer at Lake Geneva with Lord Byron and her future husband, Percy Shelley. Confined by terrible weather, they amused themselves by reading German ghost stories and, at Lord Byron's suggestion, each wrote a supernatural tale. And then Sasha Graham goes into the Emperor, and she says, with his display of authority and rigid, controlling, and unbudgeable qualities, the Emperor card carries shades of the Frankenstein monster. I could see that. I feel like when we feel like our lives are lacking control, like say if we feel like we're out of control, we can be a bit more rigid and on the defensive more. And I can see where that would come from. So I can see where she's coming from with that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the camera down here. And I'm going to move my book, which as you guys can see, who may be new to our group, this thing gets a lot of use. Again, it's the best book that I've ever used with spreads. So, highly recommend it. And so the deck that we're going to be using is one of my favorite decks, and I think it's appropriate with how Halloween will be here soon. Barbara Moore is one of my favorite tarot deck authors. She makes really beautiful decks. Of course, there's somebody here helping her with the illustrations, Jonathan Hunt. But her decks are, generally speaking, based in Rider-Waite-Smith from my experience. So it's really good, especially for somebody starting off on, say, their tarot journey. and they're wanting something outside, say the traditional. And this is perfect for just fall and the upcoming, holiday. And this is what the back of the deck looks like. And I love just the playful use of color, and of course skulls. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there who doesn't like skulls, but I am one of the people who actually likes them, including sugar skulls. Good shuffle on here. And as I'm shuffling, I'm thinking about what is it that our group needs to know about Frankenstein tonight for our theme. Like what kind of wisdom and enlightenment can we find? I'm going to go ahead and spread out my cards here. So one row will have 6. The other will have 5 for a total of 11 cards. And then I'm going to put my cards off to the side here. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn them all over. Okay, so just so you guys can see, because remember, you have a mirror image of what I actually have. So this is the first row. We're going to be working from the left, moving toward the right, and then our second row, this is the left, making our way toward the right. So the first question is called rebellion. How do I move against the grain? And what we have here would be the 4 of Wands. And this is something I think that we're getting this card for this question, because remember that the 4s in tarot are just like the legs of a table. You generally have 4 legs to a table. So we say 4s are stable like a table. So in this card, what we have would be an adult, and there's 2 little ones, and they're all dressed up. And it looks like the adult is attaching a string of ghosts. And then the little one here, dressed as a bear, is attaching a string of pumpkins. And then the baby has its little string, but it's not able to really secure them on these wands, okay? With this, again, we're looking at stability overall with relationships, home life, career. We've got that structure and balance. I would say, as far as Sasha Graham's question, how do I move against the grain? I would say that a unique viewpoint is brought. So the baby, this little guy here dressed as a bumblebee, this is the first time this little guy has probably seen, people hanging up these things that it's not sure what they are, but when they light up, they look really brilliant and cool and have different colors. So the baby would be very in awe of taking this in for the first time of its life. This little guy right here is older than, say, their sibling, and knows that, hey, I'm going to get a string of these, and I like pumpkins, and I'm going to hang that up on one of the wands. And then this, which we could assume would be like, say, the mother, she's got the ghost, and so she wants to hang those guys up. So what we have would be a difference in perspective. So, as far as rebelling, I would say it would be bringing in a different perspective of the world and maybe doing things a bit differently. Because if you notice that these two people are hanging their lights up quite differently, you know, they are ideally working together for the same task, which would be decorating, but they're doing it a bit differently. So I would see that as maybe moving a bit against the grain as far as like everybody does something a bit differently. And as long as you have, say, an ideal outcome of sorts, it's okay that people are unique and do things differently. So I feel like overall this card really, points to uniqueness, you know, and that's a beautiful thing. So I think that's cool that we got that for our first card. The second card, let's see here. Hang on a sec. I'm going to close out a message here. The second card is life creation. What do I create in my life? And we have the Page of Cups. And I really like this. Look at that little girl. And she's dressed up as a jellyfish. Isn't that so fun? I love that so much. And here she is holding up her cup. And the fish that we normally see in the Rider-Waite-Smith, look at where her fish is going. Her fish is out of water. But she's having fun. If anything, you guys know that pages in all of the various court cards, the page is very green, naive. They're very much learning. They ask questions. They like to read on things and find out everything they can. Very optimistic and bright-eyed. So this is a very youthful energy when you're talking about pages. And we have imagination in play here. So it's kind of like the, I think of the Dr. Seuss books. If you guys are like me and you've read them, like growing up or even to your own children, there's a playful use in the narrative in regard to color, scenarios within the story, and so forth. And I have that overall feeling with this card is this little girl is very much using her imagination, like she is, say, under the sea, and she's this little jellyfish, and she's interacting with this fish that may or may not be there. I mean, she could have gotten this little guy out of the fish bowl, put him into her cup with just a little bit of water, and then here she is as she's dancing around. The fish is getting away from her, right? Which it probably won't survive long if it's real. Unless she, in a very quick manner, gets it back into water, right? So being the question, what do I create in my life? I would say for creation, it's the use of imagination. So even when you think of Frankenstein and how the doctor who created him was the first of his kind to come up with this concept of using the various parts from dead corpses and putting them all together to create this new being, then harnessing the power of electricity through lightning to basically shock this being that he created and give it life. I feel that this card is a nod to say the use of imagination to be creative and thinking outside the box. And very much like the character Frankenstein, throughout that narrative, Frankenstein's very soulful, very much like a Page energy, very childlike with how he perceives others and his world. He's learning about it. He's asking those really intelligent questions that children do tend to ask. Unfortunately, our character Frankenstein doesn't have the opportunity to be playful like this little girl does. But I feel like this card also reminds us is as we're questioning the world around us and our place in it, and how we see ourselves in it as far as like what we contribute to ourselves, our families, our communities. It's learning to be playful and fun and imaginative and looking for the sheer potential of things, right? Instead of feeling very much like you're in a box. I think as adults, we feel more so like we're very much contained in a box and limited versus the way a child sees the world. It's limitless. Children are fearless. It's only as we get older and we have more of these life experiences that we lose this sense of wonder. So I like that. I like that we got this card a whole lot. What do I create in my life? So I like that that's the card we got to answer that question. Again, very much having that page energy. So the third question is for shaping destiny. What destiny should I embrace? And we have the sun. I love this. I love this deck so much. Look at this card. This little fry is dressed up like a sunflower. And this little pumpkin, because I do tend to call children pumpkins and little fries, it's looking at its cake, and it must be having a birthday, and it's got its little friend, its little cat is right there with them, and the child is making a wish as it's blowing the candles out. And yeah, it looks like it's celebrating the child's, what is it? They're having its third birthday. So this is a little kid here, right? It must be something to have a birthday during October. I think that would be cool. So to answer the question, which would be, what destiny should I embrace? I would say it would be, when I look at the flames atop the candles, we think about wands, which would be your, like, very much like your fire. It would be your passion, creativity, spark. So each of these candles could be seen like a nod toward the wand suit. And so it's all about finding what lights you up from within, like this little kid does, right? Very much in the moment and so forth, and having that forward momentum and seeing where it goes, you know. And then, of course, sharing those life experiences with somebody else, even our furry friends. It doesn't have to be a human being, but our pets that we love so much. They are part of our families. So you surround yourself with your support structure. And so, yeah, it includes people, animals, you name it, that makes your life enriched and brighter, you know, and it is certainly something to celebrate. And we have that illumination, you know. So ultimately, that is the destiny that we want to embrace, is we always want to be looking forward and up toward the sun, even during some of our hardest days that we have. Knowing that at some point there's no way left to go, or nowhere left to go but up. So it's staying focused and looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, the illumination, and being very focused and driven with where we want to go in life, and just doing the work to get there. And of course, celebrating these milestones in life, you know. So I like that we're getting that as the destiny card. The fourth card stands for alienation. What makes me feel like an outsider? And here we have the star. Look at this one. She's dressed up like a ballerina. She doesn't seem to be so worried about getting candy. She's just doing her thing, isn't she? And with the star, you know, this is a card from the Major Arcana that stands for hope. And it's also got a very restful, peaceful energy to it. Just like our ballerina, if you look at it, even her eyes are closed. So very much inwardly turned, very peaceful, in the moment, engaged with her art, because dance is, you know, an art form, and she's maintaining a balance here, which I think of Temperance, which is another major arcana card. And I like how she's got her bag with her wand right here on the ground by her. And that, like, there's a star here, which is on her crown, okay? And then it adorns her outfit here. So her skirt is just covered in all sorts of stars. And very Stevie Nicks-like. I like all these, like, different little, I don't know what you'd call them, ribbons that's hanging from her gloves. Just very beautiful. And that's with the moon in the background, and it appears to be like it's at night or it's about to get dark, and then the street lights on. But it's possible that she's not even really keeping track of the time. She's so lost in what she's doing. So to answer the question for alienation, what makes me feel like an outsider, I would say it would be marching to the beat of your own drum. So like there's other kids in the background who are preoccupied with going to houses and getting candy. But see, different from them, she is dancing to the beat of her own rhythm, and her priorities are different. Instead of worrying about time and how much candy she's going to get, how many houses she needs to get to, especially which houses have the full-size candy bars, instead her priority is just getting lost in her art and something that she loves and being creative and just being present. Others may look at her and find her to be strange or different because she's doing something completely different than them. But I think that instead of feeling lonely or vulnerable or judged, not caring about that and just being very much, again, mindful and in the moment. So I think that is a message to all of us that in life, the choices we make and who we choose to share our lives with, it may not mesh well with what others believe we should be doing. However, how do I put this? We cannot live a life where we're trying to make everybody else happy. You have to march to that internal drum, the beat of your own drum, and do what makes you happy. Because if you don't, then it's like losing little pieces of yourself and bits of who you are. And I think that would lead to a really bad form of alienation, of feeling very resentful and sad and depressed. So it's always remaining hopeful and very much embracing that your craft, the thing that lights you up from the inside, you know. So it's okay to be by yourself at times. Sometimes it's nice not to be surrounded by a lot of people, but just to, have some solitude, So the fifth card stands for monstrosity. What terrifies me? And we have the moon. That actually makes sense for this question, and I know I've went over in other Go Lives too. So in sharp contrast to the energy of the sun, the moon is more of an uncertain energy where we don't know at times what's real, what's not real. We don't have all of the info, and with the moon, it is associated with the feminine and with just that watery intuition and the changes. So the moon has all these various cycles, and just like us, we're always evolving and having these changes. So as far as the question, what terrifies me, it would be the unknown. And I think all of us could agree that we're not comfortable with feelings of not knowing about various things because of the vulnerability. Our protective internal mechanism, our ego, wants to keep us safe. And so if we don't have all the info, it may tell us not to move forward with something out of an effort to protect us. And just the feeling of not having all the info because we're not always going to know about everything. And then when I look at this card, I see this lady I really love that dress and her accessories. It's really nice. And her arms are open, so she's open to experiences here. It looks like she's got like this really big, maybe sombrero on. I mean, it's much larger than her head. So I get Mexican vibes when I see this. So I'm thinking of like Day of the Dead when I see her outfit, which is like one of my favorite things to even decorate my ancestor altar with, or in general. Like I love like Day of the Dead type stuff. But what we have here would be two dogs. Usually it's a dog and a wolf, but instead, you know, we've got two dogs and we've got the apples in the barrel. And it looks to me like maybe we don't know if the dogs took these apples out or if it was somebody else, but they're looking like one's looking at the dog here, and this dog is looking straight at us just like this lady is. And I think it just kind of shows the need just to be still and present and to watch, observe, listen, and, you know, ideally not to be reactive to our environment. And then when we feel like we're ready, then we make that forward momentum. But it's also being comfortable with not knowing everything and the unknown, right? Because we don't always know where we're going on our life path. So that makes sense, you know. The sixth card stands for madness. What makes me crazy? And that would be the Hangman. Isn't that awesome? This is so fun. It makes me look forward to Halloween. So to answer her question, what makes me crazy? What we have here is the Hangman is a card, very symbolic in the Fool's Journey, where, you know, after judgment, the Fool's feeling very much fatigued after suffering, you know, having to deal with the consequences of various actions along their journey. And so the Fool in the Major Arcana, which would be you or I, okay, it's our life journey, would take a break. And essentially the Hangman is resting, but hanging upside down to see the world from a different viewpoint. Very much observant, again, being very watchful, listening, and so forth. And again, taking it a different viewpoint. And around this, what appears to be a vampire, we've got a child here that's resting in the tree. We've got two little kids here dressed up like vampires, and they're playing around the central figure here. And I see it appears to be a cell phone that's illuminated. So I see that as a need to disconnect from social media because it's nowhere near our central vampire here. Now, the kids may, of course, have access to this technology, but the Hangman wants to maybe not have this as a distractor as they rest and obtain a different perception on things. And then home is close, but again, it's not seeking necessarily for a comfortable position to get this new way of thinking, but instead maybe being a bit uncomfortable, willing to have a bit of discomfort to find out new things. So as far as what makes me crazy, I would say social media makes a lot of us a bit crazy, right? It can trigger some people based on what they read. It can be very overwhelming, a lot of stimuli coming at all of us on a daily basis from that one thing, right? But it's also being around other people who may have different viewpoints and ideas that are in contrast to our own, and being very comfortable despite feeling uncomfortable here, and vulnerable at just being present and listening and taking it in and seeing if there's something new to be learned or, you know, whatnot, something to grow from, you know. So I like this a whole lot, you know. It makes sense. It can make somebody feel like they're going a bit crazy, you know, especially social media, I think, because it's a big distractor. For the seventh card, we're about to start with our second row of cards. It stands for secrecy. What do I repress from others? And we have the chariot. And there you go. There's the Dr. Seuss here. And then you see the kids on either side, which got Dr. Seuss into trouble during his books. And I can't, it's thing 1 and thing 2 are what they called, or were called in the books anyway. So to answer this, which is what do I repress from others, I don't know. What I see here would be this guy who's dressed up as Dr. Seuss, which would be like the adult of the group, looks rather cross-eyed. They do not look like they're having fun. However, the central figure here is allowing, say, thing 1 and thing 2, which may be, the children that they're going trick-or-treating with, to guide him or her by pulling on either arm, moving the central figure forward, even though they don't look like they'd be very stable on their feet. They may even fall from not having adequate sight. They might need to sit and rest a bit, because if you look at the card, they do not look to be well. So to answer Sasha's question, what do I repress from others? I say it would be being true to ourselves and saying no. If we're not up to doing something, we should be able to say no without having to feel like we need to explain why we're saying no. We can simply say, no, I'm not able to do whatever, without feeling like we need to go into a long explanation. So that's what I see as far as, what are we repressing in regard to this card, And with the chariot, ideally, when you're talking Rider-Waite-Smith, that's the part of the Fool's journey where the Fool basically takes the reins of the chariot and has that drive and that forward momentum. Okay, very much like the wheels on a chariot with that movement. Now with this card, it's like in sharp contrast to that image. It's allowing others to take the lead in your life versus, say, you or I having our hands on the reins and giving our life journey direction. We're giving that power away to others and allowing them to make these decisions for us that may not be good for us. So I think that is definitely an interesting thing to look at. Let's see. The 8th card stands for guilt. Does guilt influence my actions? And we have the Ace of Pentacles and a hand that's holding this pumpkin upright with the star. And we've got the green. We literally have vegetation, and we've got that green curtain. And then again, the question is, does guilt influence my actions? So, the pentacles are all about the tangible. It could be you or I, okay, because we come from the earth. It's literally our careers, home, material things, and so forth, which is being supported, this seed, this beginning full of potential is being supported by this hand, but my eye is drawn to this green curtain, which makes me think of the Hierophant and the High Priestess, with how they have knowledge, but they're usually sitting right in front of that curtain, and they're not allowing just anybody access to what they know. They really have to work hard for that. When I see this curtain in regard to this card, I'm thinking about the things that we may not like about ourselves, things that we've done in our life where we've not forgiven ourselves for these things, or even others. There could be pain felt from these interactions with various people, and they've hurt us in some way, and not forgiving them. So it makes it hard to move on when you have this big curtain in the way, because if this curtain wasn't in the way, then we could see what we're going to specifically do with this beginning and not be weighed down on our journey by things that happened in the past that we cannot change. All that we can do is, from our failures, because we all have them, and it does not mean that we're failures as human beings whatsoever, but to learn from our failures, forgive ourselves and others, which doesn't mean to forget. I'm not saying forget, but I'd say forgive, okay? Get rid of that baggage. You remove this barrier, which is the potential for what can be with a new beginning and a fresh start, and not being weighed down by a heavy curtain. So I like that. I like that we got that card for that. It's interesting. Let's see. The next would be desire. What do I crave more than anything? And we have Three of Pentacles. This makes sense with the story of Frankenstein, because if you guys have read the book like I have, all Frankenstein wanted was to belong to a community. And so as far as what do we desire, it would be to be part of a larger community and something bigger than ourselves. Ideally, it's working together for a common goal. And so I think that's good that we got this. This makes a whole lot of sense for that question, especially given the Frankenstein spread, because each of them are working together to construct this scarecrow. And that's under the limited light of the moon. They've got a lot of cloud cover and some limited illumination from the jack-o'-lantern. But again, they're working together, playing on each one of their strengths and weaknesses to construct this awesome scarecrow. And all of them are very much focused on the task and working well together, and they're not at conflict or odds with each other, and they're dressed differently. So this shows, again, that nod to uniqueness and looking different, all the ways we can be different viewpoints, different behaviors, despite their differences coming together to achieve something. So I think that makes sense desire-wise, because we all want that, The next would be occult knowledge. How does occult knowledge help me understand my reality? And we got the Three of Wands. And I like that we're seeing this figure where literally their eye is out of socket, or at least it appears to be. And the eye appears to be part of the hand here. And when I see this, even though the eye is not located, say, in the forehead region, where you would think of the third eye, which would be like your seeing eye, but instead it's the hand. To me, that's a nod to mysticism and occult knowledge and intuition, seeing the life differently. And being that the eyeball's located on the hand, it makes me think that instead of getting lost in, say, logic, it could be partial intuition, because now, we don't know how well this person sees, so they're going to have to adapt and use their other senses, and also be very attentive to their intuition, which is always desirable, especially with that moon hanging out. Yes, logic comes into play, but strengthening the other senses as well. And using the hands. So it's experiencing things in life. It's through hard work and doing that we build on our experiences and knowledge, which can change the way that we look at life. And with the Wands, it's all about, again, that fiery energy, creativity, passion, and drive. By the time we get to the Three, it's all about that forward momentum and executing what we planned out so thoroughly with the Two of Wands. With the Three, it's like alchemy. You've got two things that combine to make a new product, or you have two people, for example, working together who then construct and give birth to something new. So I like that we got this, as far as how does occult knowledge help me understand my reality? And it would be honestly to gain a different, understanding of the world around you by using different forms of knowledge and experiences. So that's really cool, And then the last card is dangerous knowledge. What do I know that I wish I didn't know? And what we have here would be the Nine of Wands. This is interesting. Again, it's another Star Wars reference, even though that's a green lightsaber, even though it looks to me like the kid should have a red one. I get Sith vibes. So if you guys know Star Wars, you know what I'm talking about. Look at that face. Very intensely guarding what appears to be treasure that has been barricaded with these various sticks that have been tied together. And it looks like the central figure here is very much protecting this treasure that they've accumulated, and they're willing to defend and go to battle with anybody who tries to take it from them. So what it is, let's see here. And Tim can correct me if I get the order wrong. I'm going to try to remember. So anger leads to, what is it? Hate, is it? Leads to grief, leads to suffering. It's some order like that. But basically, and I know Tim would be able to maybe correct me on that, but Master Yoda in Star Wars alludes to how our fear of loss and attachment can take people over to the dark side, okay? So what do I know that I wish I didn't know? It would be, maybe as we go along, a young person wouldn't assign like if they're a baby, if they're a youth, they're not going to assign a lot to material things, right? But as we get older, we learn these things have value, and then we're very much greedy and wanting to maintain a hold on these things. So maybe this is a nod to, you know, here it is toward the end of the wand journey with this card. After so many accolades and accomplishments and doing so well, maybe it's feeling a bit too defensive and afraid of maybe letting others in, maybe being afraid of people stealing our work. If it makes sense, like feeling vulnerable. So to answer her question, what do I know that I wish I didn't know, is that unfortunately sometimes our successes and so forth in life, when it comes to all these various things that we strive to do well in, can bring out some not so great sides to humans. And maybe that greed and attachment that we feel is not good for us as a community. It's definitely not good for us as individuals. So maybe it'd be good, instead of feeling this, if this barricade around the treasure was let down, and then the individual be open to maybe sharing with others and not being so afraid of losing what they have. So, and let's see, my hubby says, oh, I knew he'd know it. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Thank you, Tim. Because I could not remember the order of all that, but I felt like it was relevant for that card that obviously had a Star Wars theme. So that wraps us up tonight for this spread. And if you have anything to add when you watch this as a replay or whatnot, feel free to leave it in the comments. And I hope you guys have a restful evening, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.